Minutes with the one change in the first paragraph under flooding concerns, Brookside Drive, that on the last sentence, change April to August. Move to approve otherwise.
Okay, Frank?
I will second.
Okay, good, all in favor say aye.
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 And just so you know, Liz Ruffa is joining us by Zoom call. Hi, Liz.
Hi there. Aye.
Okay, so, Nat's in here tonight, sorry about that. Do we have any public comment? I say to
Hopefully
Dave.
not. So much
Anything from
public
the
comment.
computer?
And maybe Ken Gilbert, in case he has something.
Yeah, I can't tell today if I'm cold or warm.
Yeah, it was a nice night.
It's nice outside.
Yeah, it's beautiful, just a little warm in here.
Yeah.
Okay, then assuming there is no public comment, we can move on to the draft town plan and bylaw review. I can see that Brandy is on on Zoom with us. And I just wanted to raise something, Brandy, because we had seen some of the language that had been inserted that we hadn't really discussed, but we'd heard that there was some stuff coming down from the state. One of the questions I had was, why would we be putting language like that into our regulations? Why wouldn't we just have a cite to the state statute? Because if in fact the statute is going to change, or if in fact it's being controlled by that state statute, it seems most accurate, rather than trying to take language and put it in, to refer to it so that people can go and specifically go to the state statute to find out what it says.
So legally you can do that. We don't think it's a particularly good practice to set the regulations up that way. We've been at a lot of hearings over the years, and very few people have their statutes open in front of them at those hearings. So for clarity, it's very helpful to have the full administrative process written out in the regulations. You will ultimately end up out of sync because the legislatures do change statute over time. Your current regulations have many sections that are out of sync with statute. So it is a trade-off between knowing that you will get out of sync. The state law will always take precedence and will apply irrespective of what the words on the page in your document are. We think that it's helpful for people to be able to see all of those administrative chunks, and I mean, much of Article 4 is exactly that. Probably 2/3 of the language is pretty much directly from statute.
And all I can say is that it's also rare in our experience that communities move to immediately amend their local regulations when statute is amended, but there are typically, in the cycle of doing things, there are reasons to pass amendments on your own regulations every couple of years, or maybe 3 or 4, and that's always a good time to update the regulations. But I think what we're balancing off here is definitely a trade-off. The balance is usability of the document, particularly by applicants, and people putting together applications on the one hand, and length of the document and the possibility that it's going to be out of date on the other hand, I guess, is the way we think about it.
How long is this section? I didn't bring my copy. I'm sorry to say.
So there were actually 2 places, and correct me if I'm wrong, the 2 places that, other than the stuff referring to duplexes, but the 2 sections, it was like 4401.4 that just had a sentence that said, residents, it was talking about residents who can appeal. Sorry, I didn't print it out
Yeah.
because it's so long.
So
And then there was something else.
It's 4401B on page 4-32. So the Act 47 revised the definition of an interested person. The change is to add residents to the list of voters and landowners as to who qualifies to join in a petition to appeal an application. And then they have also limited appeal rights, or the grounds that an affordable housing project could be appealed. So that is the new paragraph C that you're seeing there.
Yeah, because that says you can no longer appeal based on the character of your neighborhood,
Yep,
correct?
With regard to housing, yes,
affordable.
affordable housing. And then, yeah. Then
How do you
change the
define-
area.
How do you define affordable housing?
Statute has a definition of affordable housing. It's got a lot of numbers in it. It's fairly lengthy, but they have income-based standards for both ownership and rental housing, and then a development project that has at least 5 units or 20% of the units, whichever is greater, that meet those qualifying definitions of affordable units, then is classified as an affordable housing project.
So the other thing that I'm a bit confused about, and I did not actually look up the statute, is that when I was just looking at one of the press releases, they were talking about with municipal zoning reforms, that it only pertains to districts served by water and sewer, which
Correct.
are none of ours. So why would we have that in our regulations?
So Act 47 contains quite a few pieces and changes to statute. A whole bunch of them are solely for areas that are served by water and sewer, and those mostly relate to the density of development that you have to allow, the types of housing you have to allow. Some of those pieces are all just for water and sewer. But then there's pieces like the duplex piece and some of these administrative things that relate to conditions of approval and appeals that apply everywhere. So it's a mix.
So is this not over encompassing by just putting all of these provisions in here, because they might only pertain to certain units?
The language that we've included in the Dorset regulations are those that are pertinent across the jurisdiction, regardless of whether you've got water and sewer.
Okay. And is also 4505E, there's 6 or 7 lines there, and I'm assuming that also has something to do with the Home Act.
Yes.
But it's a little, like, in my mind, it's confusing because it's like those exams the teacher gives you where everything's a double negative. Like, you cannot do this unless this does not happen, and I'm looking at it going, you wanna cross out every other word, so, and it also seemed a bit strange because it's already saying, like, if you're requiring a minimum, whatever it is, a minimum standard in your regulations, you can't then go and require more. But in our regulations, we're saying that this is what you need, like, 1 house per 1.5 acres. And so this is basically saying you can't, if somebody meets the 1 house per 1.5 acres, you can't say, no, you have to have 3 acres. So it seems a little redundant to me, confusing, double negative, and redundant. So why would that be necessary?
I think you just summarized most of the work, most years of the legislature, but, yeah.
So maybe a little bit of context will help explain where this language emerged from. A significant amount of input into the proposed, what became the Home Act, Act 47, came from affordable housing providers across the state, and they have had a number of unpleasant outcomes in development decision making for affordable housing projects that they were hoping through these statutory changes to prevent from happening in the future. So they, you know, a development review board, planning commission, you know, conditioning approval, or zoning board conditioning approval of a project, but, you know, reducing the number of potential units, you know, maybe around that character of the area question. That's what this is intended to prevent. It is quite clumsily written, and this is pretty much directly as it's in statute.
Oh, okay.
So, so
Yeah, we don't argue with your critique at all. But
So Brandy, how would the planning commission, how's the planning commission, when they review these proposals, gonna know what is a non-discretionary standard or a discretionary standard?
So
And then
something
how
that
would
is,
judicial body
non-discretionary
know
is
that?
written into the regulations, you know, there's no room for interpretation. So for instance, you know, you have regulations that say you can't build in wetlands. That's a non-discretionary standard. It's not, you know, that the planning commission is to look at, you know, the natural resource conditions and decide how to minimize impact. That's a discretionary decision. It's an outright, no, you can't do it. So that's the difference. So you have both kinds of language in the regulations in various places,
which is typical.
yeah.
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 Okay.
I just like that whole first week, Henry and I must have spent 20 minutes reading this out loud to each other. Unless necessary to comply with a non-discretionary standard of these regs, they may not condition approval. And it's like, if it's a non-discretionary standard, then it's a given. So why would it be necessary to comply if they're asking for more than what's in the, it seems to me nonsensical, but.
Yeah, it really relates back directly to affordable housing projects that through the development review process got conditioned down to less than the maximum possible under the zoning regs.
Right.
And so just to give some context there's a industry of affordable housing providers operating in the state. They're in their own kind of market and their own kind of world. They use tax credits and other financial instruments to advance their projects. They compete for access to those financial resources. And when they come to a town seeking approval for an affordable housing project, there's usually very little margin for error or ability to negotiate. So the project is either going to work and usually has to have the maximum number of units, or they don't start. And so they've had frequent experiences across Vermont where local DRBs and planning commissions have imposed conditions on their project which make them no longer viable. So this is an effort on the part of the legislature to limit the ways in which local boards and commissions can either inadvertently or intentionally undermine the financial viability of an individual project.
So just, you know, like from a lawyerly point of view, with things like this, I always like to see where the citation is, because then once this isn't in blue anymore, nobody knows which part is the state statute and which part is ours. Wouldn't it be better off to let's just say on number 3 there, the unless necessary, just say like in accordance with the Home Act or the state statute Home Act, because that would at least flag people that they should go and check and see if anything's changed.
Yeah, we could add a citation there if you'd like to see that. I don't know the number for this one off the top of my head. It's in 44 something. We'll have to look up the
Yeah.
rest of the numbers.
Yeah. This one was in 4505, and I don't know where else
Yeah,
that
no, in
is
statute,
Statute.
it's 24 VSA 44 something.
Oh, yeah,
I
yeah,
just can't
yeah,
remember the other two numbers.
yeah.
Yeah, we
Because I
can find
think
it, and I think.
that
I
at
think-
least flags it so that, you know, for maybe 2 years from now, or for all we know is in your email, you know, it could be like 6 months from now, if they change it, then at least everyone will say, okay, this was one of those sections we should double check. To see if it's still valid. It
Yeah.
just seems like a good idea, since that language is coming from them, that we just cite it.
Brandy, in this, again, looking at 4505E3, this will apply to all residential development though, not,
This one
Because-
does, yeah.
Yes, that's correct.
so,
Yeah.
what kind of, you know, it's not just affordable housing developments, so
No,
are there any unintended consequences in here that we should be concerned with?
I don't think there are unintended consequences. The intent of the legislature is to make it more difficult for municipalities to reduce development potential below what is authorized in your zoning regulations. So if you say you can have one house for every 1.5 acres, people can have one house for every 1.5 acres. You know, there's not going to be, through the development review process, a way to reduce that number, unless there are these non-discretionary things, like, you know, obviously they do need wastewater, and they can't build over a wetland, and they can't build in the floodplain, but, you know, the reasons are gonna have to be much more specific than they used to be for why you might, limit development potential for residential development.
Thank you.
So let's just say for a commercial project, I assume we're inserting this because, let's say for a commercial project, it meets the setbacks, height, everything. The planning commission could say, we'd like it if it was on a little bit bigger parcel. Or, you know what, we'd like you to increase the setback for whatever reason. Sounds like the planning commission would have the authority for that?
Those are the types of conditions that you do see get put on projects, that, you know, they hold a hearing, they hear from the community, there's statements about, you know, the scale of that building is too large for our community or for our neighborhood, and they condition it down to a smaller building, you know, they reduce the footprint. That happens, or reduce the height, that happens. If they can justify that in the criteria of conditional use review or site plan review, which you often can, then that's fine. The legislature intends to take that ability away for residential development.
Okay.
It should be very clearly understood that the legislature intends to change the landscape with regard to how housing is permitted, and how frequently housing development is subject to appeal.
And so
you
even
know, I
if,
think those aspects of the Home Act haven't gotten a lot of press coverage, but as planners, we actually think that this series of small changes to the appeal rights and the conditions of approval are something that's going to be more impactful and probably lead to more conversations like this one in communities around the state. Because I think it's kind of a bit of a surprise that we've heard about other pieces, but we didn't sort of know this was here, and this was part of the package.
and so even if we didn't have this in the zoning at all, it's still law, and
Yes.
it might just be confusing when somebody comes in, or a board might not know they can't do this, and that just creates headaches, but whether or not it's in our regulations, it still has to be followed, right?
Yes, and I think that these are parts that actually went into effect on July 1. So I think these are already in effect statewide.
So is the addition of the word residence also part of this act?
Mm-hmm,
Yes,
yes,
So by resident, it could be someone who owns a house here but only lives here 4 months a year, or maybe never lives here?
A
Well, they would be a
renter?
property owner. A resident would
Would
be
be
a renter.
somebody that doesn't have property, but does, and may or may not vote, but can demonstrate residency status.
Okay.
I don't think they define how they're going to determine who counts as a resident, but I think that
And so that language there is actually getting at who can appeal if they think something is harming them, correct? That's what
Yeah.
we're talking
Correct.
about.
So you could be a tenant and
It's not in accordance with the Dorset Town Plan, but of course our Dorset Town Plan does take character into effect. And this is saying that when it comes to affordable housing, no one can take that into account, correct?
as a grounds for appeal, so the appeal can't be, this affordable housing project does not fit into the character of our neighborhood. So there would have to be other basis for the appeal.
Okay.
Is this, the section on duplexes similarly coming from the state, allowing a duplex where a single family home could go?
Yes, and that has gone into effect. It is statewide, it is, no matter whether you're on water and sewer or not. So going forward, a 2-unit dwelling will be treated exactly the same as a 1-unit dwelling. So you can do conversions or new construction. The same set of rules will apply whether it's 1 or 2.
I mean, with the 4401C, again, I know it's a small thing, but because it's such a peculiar thing, I think that it would also be good to have a citation to the state statute, just because that will allow
Okay.
people, if something changes, that will let people know, because otherwise people will say, oh no, this is definitely what, the planning commission and the town thought was right for our community, and they might not look to some of these smaller things that could be out of character.
Mm-hmm.
And also in regards to the residents, and 10 people or more, I read somewhere, maybe from you guys, that the legislature is likely to bring that up again in the winter session, and trying to eliminate that.
That, I think that is still on the table in the legislature. They had, the last draft before the one they adopted, had basically taken out what is paragraph 4 there under 4401B, altogether. And that didn't come out of the the part that actually got adopted, it got dropped, but I think that it will come back as a point of discussion. And once again, it's around that sort of setting the dial on appeal rights. There's certainly, the legislators are hearing from plenty of primarily affordable housing developers, but others as well, that it's just too easy to appeal housing development projects under statute. And the appeals are, the perception is that many appeals are just being filed solely to delay projects, and delay ultimately leads to projects failing to be viable.
Yeah.
Right. So if it gets removed by the legislature this winter, but it's still in our document,
Right.
is that a problem for us then?
No, I mean, you adopt regulations today, and the legislature can do something, anytime after that will lead to there being a discrepancy or a lack of conformance. And like Rod said, the next time you do an update to your regs, you clean up those things, you do your housekeeping and you fix those things. And you have your zoning administrator keeps track of those pieces. For instance, the accessory dwelling language that you've had in your regulations for a number of years have been out of sync with statute, and Tyler's just been following statute. And that's just how you would do it with other sections too.
Right, and the
So-
League of Cities and Towns and other entities, including the State Department of Housing and Community Development, run really frequent trainings, and generally, whenever there is a legislative change, no matter how minor, the planning community and the ZA community are made aware of the changes, and so, you know, as Brandy pointed out, Tyler's been working with the statutory language around ADUs and other aspects of the statute for a long time, and knows which sections of the Dorset regulations are out of date.
So, yeah, I mean, I definitely appreciate that, it's just nice not to have it there in the beginning, because if you've got residents looking at it, relying on it, they don't know if it hasn't been updated. So like, for instance, if
Right.
that information has been wrong for a long time, it should have been updated a long time ago, so people sort of can make some plans. But if we know this is potentially gonna come out,
Well, yeah,
Why would
not?
we don't
Yeah.
know.
We
We
have
don't
a
know,
bunch.
it's
Yeah, I think that the reaction is pretty strong, you know, what we're hearing, but that there's no way of, at this point in summer, figuring out
Right.
what the agenda for the legislature is gonna be next year, or what the advice that, you know, who's giving them the advice from the other side, so it's not clear to us that something's gonna change next year at this point.
But the fact is that any state law is gonna overrule any municipal
Yes.
law.
Yeah.
Yes, that is correct.
Yeah. So if it gets changed, it's,
but if they didn't address that issue, and in other words, if they did their act and they took that language out and we still had it in, ours could still overrule it, because it's not that they're saying that wouldn't apply, they're just not including it, correct?
well, this is the way it is
Because
now.
then this would be more specific.
What we have in is what the way it is now,
Right, so I'm saying if they take it out at the state level,
yeah. That would
usually it's
overrule
like if they make it more specific, then you have to follow them, but if they're just not addressing it, then we would, so if they have this and then they remove it from their statute, you could say they're not addressing it, and then we would still have that language in there.
I
Anyway,
don't
sorry.
think that you could offer appeal rights to entities that haven't been granted them by statute, because I actually think that that's the reverse, is that you're actually going more broad than
Right.
statute allows. So
And
it's,
you can't, and
Yeah.
that's not possible, so.
No.
Statute basically defines the walls that you can exist inside. And you can't be more permissive or more restrictive than statute unless it explicitly allows you to do that. And in this instance, they're not, so, whether or not your regulations say it, you're required to adhere to statute.
Yeah, no, I totally understand that. Is it literally just the residence part, or is it that whole provision that they're talking about?
struck.
Right.
And that seemed to have strong support, it just wasn't there in the end. We don't know exactly why it was pulled at the very end, but the sense is that it's gonna come back. The sense is that they're gonna continue with other housing changes next session, because there's still things on the table, I guess.
Right.
Is what we understand.
Yeah, so the affordable housing community feels as if their work is not yet complete, and I would say the legislature has that view as well.
Okay. Did you guys have any other questions? We went through, so obviously this is the thing that we noticed because it was something that, you know, nobody had discussed and it just sort of popped up there, so that's why we were, you know, just wanting to know what the parameters are and what we're required to do. relating to the other changes that were made, both with, was it wastewater or stormwater, Frank? You saw
Yeah,
what was
the-
done there?
The stormwater, that all made sense, and that's what we talked about.
Yep, and all the Airbnb stuff, came out.
Yeah, the only other question is, you use the date September 5th. Was that
Yep.
just an arbitrary?
No, it actually needs to be changed. We were incorrect in thinking that your meeting was last week, so we were working off of August 15th as your potential vote date. So if you vote on it tonight, it goes and approve it, it goes into effect 21 days after
Okay.
that. So it would go forward another week to September 12th. So everywhere where that citation is, will have to get updated to reflect whatever the 21 days is after you make a decision.
Okay,
Do we wanna wait till we have this act cited in the law before we vote on it?
Did you find the numbers?
What she said she would.
yeah, to like refer to a state statute.
Right,
Yeah, I mean, I think it's a good idea to refer to the state statute, particularly if there are gonna be a lot of changes, because it just flags it for everyone,
Yep.
that those are areas that are gonna change. The other question I had for you, Brandy, and this just came up today as I was going through all of this, and I just kind of wanna know how this works. I did not go back into the old regs, or I was trying to look at the old regs and how they worked and whether this was a change, and just in terms of unanticipated consequences. For instance, so the Dorset Field Club, I forget, I think it used to be ARR, the clubhouse and stuff, and it sits in this funny spot, right? So it has the driveway, and then it cuts behind these other properties, and has the clubhouse. And so now it is zoned, sorry, this gnat's driving me crazy. It's now zoned general business. So one of the questions I had when I was looking at the setbacks, it used to be, at least like with like village commercial, the side and the rear were like 15 feet or 25 feet. And when I'm looking at it now, it says that where one zone butts up against another zone, which it would there because it's village residential in the front and general business in the back. The rear and side setback, so one question is it a rear and side setback? Is it side, is it rear, is it front? I don't know, because it's behind, it's facing the street looking through a property, so I don't know exactly where that is, but, and I was I'm going through this because I just want to make sure it wouldn't change for anybody else either. That setback now has to be 40 feet, which seems quite large compared to what I feel like the setbacks used to be, and I know Tyler's on here, so I don't know, Tyler, if you remember, was there something that said if you go from one zoning district and you're touching another, or I don't know if you even know this. It was not something that I had focused on, and then today the good news is the field club meets the setback, whichever setback you think it's going to be. But I just wanted to see if that was a purposeful change, that we're trying to increase that setback for one zoning district against another, and I was trying to think if there were any other places that might have affected in that way, because then suddenly 40 feet is kind of a lot. So I just wondered, does anybody know, was that in the old regs that we had a bigger setback when you're going from one zoning district to another?
This is Tyler. I don't believe the current document has language to that effect.
You mean the
I
existing,
can't-
in one in
I can't say
existence
I've looked
now,
for
yeah.
it recently, but I'd be surprised if there was something there.
yeah, I don't
Okay.
think it did.
Okay.
And the field, the field club will be mostly in the rural mixed use district. So it's not the general business, it's the rural
Mixed use.
mixed use.
Well, the main clubhouse and all the buildings around the clubhouse, which is where we have our most densely, the maintenance sheds are in rural mixed use. And like I said, I went out with a tape measure, so we definitely, like all our buildings, because I just wanted to make sure we didn't suddenly become a non-conforming use because of a change in the setback. And I didn't know if anybody had checked on any of the other buildings, they're sort of in tight quarters there. But that section is general business, where the clubhouse is and the pro shop. And then we also have that funny thing, because there's a little piece of property that cuts into the middle of the field club. So it's rather a unique, lot. But,
So, I think the main building is actually it's in the village business district.
I thought in the
So,
map,
yeah, that's an extension of the village business district, so the village, that's the reddish color, not the purplish color.
It's hard to see.
oh, I see what you're saying, it's village business, not general business, okay.
Yeah.
Right, yes.
Yes.
Yep. Okay, at any rate, I think we're fine. I was just curious if anybody had just, thought about that purposefully, to make a change there, because sometimes you can make changes and just not realize that there's something in there. But if it's general business, then you're right, then we're talking about J.K. Adams. So that shouldn't be an issue, because they've got plenty of space. And Tennis Way, okay, my mistake.
No, it's okay. It is a tricky piece of land.
Yeah, and it's just hard to
Spent
put
a
the
long time
maps.
talking about the boundaries of where to break those
Yeah.
districts and where to put the design review on the field club property, so.
Yeah, no, I
we
know,
looked at that one for a fair amount.
it's a strange lot. Okay, so, and with steep slope, I think we're all,
Yep.
were you okay on that? It looked like what we talked about, so I think all the changes were in there. Do we want to take a vote tonight and say, with citations, pointing out where things are attributable to the state statute, those, the new language? Or do we wanna wait and see that?
I'd be comfortable approving with that condition that they be put in.
About you, Henry?
I would, I'd rather wait until we see it. But if you guys wanna go ahead, I won't be a wrench in the works.
Liz,
So
what are you
Stand in
thinking?
the way
we did
properly.
find them, it's, the appeal, the interested person language is in 24 VSA 4465, and the conditions of approval was in 4468, did you say?
I think so, yes.
68. So what we would add would be, as per 24 VSA
Correct.
4465, comma, rest of sentence.
Exactly.
And then here are my feelings of it.
So it would be in those sections, which would be
Yeah.
basically those three sections, right? 4401C, 4401B,
And 45.
and 4505E.
Mhm.
Yeah, just say like in accordance with VSA blah, 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 comma, and then start the language.
So Brandy,
Does
this.
that make sense?
Yeah,
Go ahead.
I'm on a whole new subject, going back to the 1,600-foot elevation.
Oh, you wanted to go back to that?
Yeah, I just want to clarify something. But I'll let her finish what she's doing.
Did you decide to approve it above 1,600?
Yes.
Character review, right?
Yes.
Yeah, it might be
But
that
what
one.
I'm concerned about is up on top of Danby Mountain Road.
I thought that she said the map had, that
Yeah,
was not
you-
part of it in the map,
you
that
talked
they
about
changed
just
it.
So this only applies to the
Rural
rural resource
Rural
protection zone.
Right.
Yep.
And then it's 2,000 else.
They haven't.
That was
Yes.
so nice.
So it wouldn't impact Tammy Mountain Road.
That's the area.
Cause there's
In
that
that
flat
way.
part up there.
Yeah.
I just want to,
I have a question about that one, when she gets back to
this is saying you can do it, but you've gotta demonstrate additional.
As long as you're under 1,600 feet.
So it's at the roads. What is this?
Wish this document weren't so long, it's like, I scroll through it, it takes an hour. Get a little cross-eyed.
There's some lots here that are.
Yeah, there's a
Oh, that's okay, because they're
a
under.
link table of contents in the beginning that works pretty good, but once you get into
Yeah,
it.
these
Yeah,
are-
I know,
It's a 1,600 feet
yeah,
line
it's
is right there.
better to just like zoom all the way back up to the top and then click on what you
They
want.
would be considered
And then it'll go back
pre-existing,
down to it.
non-conforming. Like
Because otherwise
when
you-
Scott was
I
talking
know.
about those
it's
lots,
so long.
Yeah, you get lost.
are they above 16?
I think if they are already permitted
Yeah.
for
they-
development,
They,
they're okay, I think. Maybe we should ask her.
I swear I saw something that said 1,600 was the max if you're in the resource protection area, but 2,000?
Who's in the building envelope definition?
Okay.
Frank, I think was the,
oh, are you saying no, nothing above 1,600 feet anywhere?
Correct.
in the
44.
rural resource protection.
Yeah, and it has to be within the rural resource protection area,
The green,
the green.
so nothing above 1,600 in the green.
In the green.
In the rural resource protection area.
But if
But-
it's outside of that, and it's above 1,600 feet,
You're,
Then it's still okay.
16 to 2,000, they could do it, but they'd have to meet all the
All the
slopes
criteria.
and all the
There'd
other
be
stuff.
very few number of
Yeah,
properties.
it's
I
like
thought you were doing a
2%.
townwide,
well, it's only 2% of,
yeah.
or 1% of
Right.
everything above 1,600 feet. That's-
Because the rural, right, of the way the rural zone's drawn in.
Yeah, yeah.
Okay.
Okay, so before we get to that, so let me just clarify with you guys, so it would be 4401B4, 4401C, and 4505E. If those can just begin with, in accordance with VSA, blah, 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 whatever the specific thing
Yep.
is. That way it's at least flagged, and even though there may be other smaller things throughout, but those are sort of the three major ones that, the thing about duplex is gonna be much less impactful. So that would be great. And then Henry, what did you want to say
So just
about
to
that?
to confirm then that the 1,600-foot prohibition applies only to rural resource protection zones.
Right,
if
it's
you're-
written into that zoning district language.
Correct.
So it's actually in section 2107, so it applies only in that district.
So, but if a lot above 1,600 feet in rural resource protection zone already has, let's say, a permit or a home already permitted, they are grandfathered or they are allowed to proceed with that permit.
Yes, given the life of the permit. So it depends whether they've got a zoning permit,
Subdue.
yeah, what kind of a permit we're talking about, they have a lifespan. And if the work is done within that the lifespan of the permit, then yes.
But to be really clear, if the permit has expired, then their ability to do that goes with it, so.
Yeah.
Is anybody under any obligation to notify those people?
No.
No.
Only,
The
you know,
notice.
we do with the public hearing
Yeah.
process.
That's the
That's the
notice.
notification that we rely upon,
We sent postcards,
yeah.
what else did we do? Posters, emails.
Okay, I'm
Okay.
satisfied.
And anything else?
I don't think so, not for me.
Liz, did you have anything else? Okay. So then I'm going to go out on a limb and suggest we vote on it. And so if we could get a motion to approve and adopt. Would that be the correct motion, Rob?
We'll need one for the bylaw
And one for the town plan. Okay, so how about first a town plan motion to
Motion
approve
to-
and adopt the changes to the town plan as
Presented.
presented.
I will make that motion.
I will second that
Okay.
motion.
All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Okay, town plan adopted. Okay, so now can we have a motion to approve and adopt the latest draft with the 3 changes we specified tonight, referring to the state statutes, in those 3 sections? Can I have that motion?
I will make that motion.
I will second.
Okay, any further discussion on this? All right, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Aye. Okay. And again, a huge thank you to planning commission, trustee helpers,
Randy
everybody
and Rob,
who made
Hey,
this
come-
possible.
high
this
five,
back.
guys.
Come back.
Come closer.
Come closer, Gabe.
21 days.
You gotta get,
I have to get
We
right
can't
here.
see
Get in
you.
the camera.
yeah, get in the camera.
Thank you.
I'm right here, high five.
Congratulations.
Thank you, guys.
So thank you all, and planning commission,
Yes, thank you.
really well done. And Brandy and Rob, thank you so much. Very helpful, and we very much appreciate it, particularly all your explanations and background and all of that.
You're welcome.
I have a quick question before we depart.
Yeah.
Are we going to get a revised issue, copy of the whole bylaws with all these changes before our next meeting? Or just at least those pages where these changes were made tonight regarding the state statutes?
When is your next meeting, Guy?
September 5th.
Yes.
Yeah.
Just those, the necessary changes maybe, okay?
Yeah.
Yeah, we'll package everything and send it over, we'll CC you in on that. And like we said, it goes into effect 21 days, so from tonight, so will also be an adjustment in the text that you looked at tonight to reflect that date.
Right.
Accurately, I guess it will be September 12th.
Okay,
Great.
Okay,
All right.
thank you.
So
You
it
can
won't-
all go home
Won't be
now.
relevant at that meeting,
I know, but.
but it'd be nice to have
It'll
it.
be in,
Right.
it'll be on the train track, right?
So really,
Is your Reed Farm discussion to do with the water and everything and the bridge or anything that's on the agenda?
I doubt it, is that?
Okay.
Just
When
under-
are you
What are we
gonna
talking
update
Under
us
old
on
business, I think.
Reed Farm? She's
Oh, Reed
asking
Farm.
if the Reed Farm
Okay.
discussion is,
I mean,
if there's any new information on there.
just the discussion about the stripping out the
we-
sediment and stuff, right?
Yeah, we completed the in-stream project on August 4th. We were able to get permission to actually take more material out. The initial permit only allowed for 167 cubic yards. We took 350 cubic yards out.
From the bridge, Rob? Under the bridge?
Downstream of the
Or
bridge.
downstream of the
Yeah.
bridge, beyond the-
Downstream of the bridge. And we're able to also dig out what we're calling flood chutes, and they have water consistently, which is going to allow for higher flows to exit the area before it actually comes up and hits the bridge and all that. And as a result of the initial part of the work, the water has dropped over a foot, and the project is going to exceed the budget. But they're telling me the grant has some flexibility. So that part of the project's done.
Okay. Great, thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Well, I am gonna leave, thanks.
Yes, please.
Go relax.
Thank you, guys. Okay, so why don't we move on to the tax rate?
So I have the certificate for the board to sign, and.
We
kind of
already
the-
voted on this, didn't we?
We did, yeah,
We did that by email.
yeah, we did, and I've attached that to the certificate,
Okay,
so I'll
so you
just
just
pass
need
it
to
around to
sign
sign it, yeah. And the bills are out, and, the due date's on September 12th.
And you need everyone to sign that, right?
Yeah, anybody else that can stop by,
Mhm.
or anybody that voted on it, which I think was everybody, so Liz and
Yeah.
I'll shoot an
Jim when
email
he's
to
back.
Jim when he's back.
Okay, so I see we're on to nonprofit appropriation, but the next thing in our
Yeah, I
package is the
think-
Coolidge Lane thing. Should we just do that now because you need
Sure.
us to sign it?
Let's see. I think if you give me permission to sign for the town,
Okay.
that'll work. I included the MOU, it's pretty boilerplate.
Yeah.
Attorney Barlow drafted it up, it's based on the notes from our meetings. And then also based on the, what the board approved with the proration and the allocation of
Yep.
materials costs.
So I
Okay.
move we authorize the town manager, Rob Giotti, to sign and complete the MOU with Coolidge
Lane
and,
residents.
and residents on Coolidge Lane?
Coolidge Lane.
Yeah.
Coolidge Lane residents, how's that?
I'll second.
Okay, all in favor say aye.
I,
Aye.
Aye.
Okay. So got that out of the way. So the nonprofit appropriation discussion. And again, unfortunately, Jim is not here tonight, but,
I think it's at the very back of it.
you could see what,
We
Rosalie had, yeah,
received a memo, just before the last board meeting. And it kind of highlights some of the discussions that have been had recently with consideration to the process and some concerns that maybe the board and or some voters have.
I also asked Rob to check with Jim Barlow because the statutes that are listed in my mind don't necessarily say what everyone takes them to say. I mean, it's not explicit. It says you have to put in an article the way it says, and then it says the town may appropriate funds for different not-for-profits. But I don't, in my reading, I don't see anything that says the town is required to appropriate the funds just because they ask for them. So that's what I wanna see. So when I was digging, I just wanted to go back over that with Jim Barlow, because I don't see anything in the statute that says you must appropriate that amount of funds, because to me, it's two different things. It's voting to approve appropriation of some funds, but there should be some discretion, I would think, on what that number is, and I'm just not sure yet. Anyway, I just thought we'd check with Jim Barlow, but in the meantime, I found this little peculiar thing online, where it's basically telling all the not-for-profits how to ask for money from towns. And in it, they say that if you have a floor vote, then someone can get up and make an amendment to the amount of money being requested. Versus if it's on Australian ballot,
Right.
then you have to put
Yes
it
or
in
no.
as written.
right,
So that sort of implies that everybody is taking this as you know, as law, that, and it may very well be, there might be something else out there. I just thought you could interpret those laws a little bit differently than people are. Maybe there's something more explicit somewhere else that I don't know about, but which I thought was very interesting. So that would definitely lend us more to making sure everything is a floor vote, and then, you know, having discussions with parties ahead of time, or planting someone to amend it if we don't like what they're asking for.
yeah, I mean, I like that flexibility,
Mhm.
being able to address it and debate it on the floor where you don't have that opportunity if you just go straight to Australian ballot.
Exactly. But I also think we do have just a few organizations that are asking for quite a lot of money. And, you know, like for instance, the VNA, where it seems to be, there was a reason at one point, but we're paying now proportionally so much more than everyone else, and they're doing, I mean, it's not like, you know, I'm sure it's not like they're rolling in cash, but they're doing well enough that that seems disproportionate for our town.
They are rolling in cash.
Yeah. So, you know, that may be something that it would be worthwhile addressing ahead of time if we have a few parties that we just wanna, you know, discuss what the amounts are, or suggest that, you know, maybe there will be an amendment. Maybe they wanna rethink what they're requesting.
So if we change this, it would be really changed for 2025, not for 2024.
You would have to, yeah, you're gonna have to warn some, language to change it,
All right.
at next town meeting. The other items
what
that
would-
you
what
could
would actually
change
be
before
changed?
that would be, well, the floor vote versus Australian.
Right.
Certain dollar amounts being one versus the other. The other things that are, in your purview to change now are the petition requirements, the whole grandfathering after 3 years of successful
Right.
petitions. You know, that's all malleable, that's stuff that the town just kind of, instituted on its own, above and beyond. There's nothing in statute that says that, you know, if you petition for 3 years, you don't have to do it again. That's just our
Right.
kind of, you know, town policy. So that stuff could change. And with, you know, with no voter, you know, no voter interaction. It's just a simple memo to the nonprofits in advance to let them know that they do have to get a petition.
So if we were to go to a floor vote, then that would mean we would remove those things from our ballot, correct? Australian ballot.
Yes. Yeah, right now they're, the items that are voted from the floor aren't on the ballot, you know, the voted ballot.
Right.
They're in the warning as an article, but it's just done from the floor. And it's, yeah,
So,
I think we should wait until Jim gets here.
Yeah, I think so
Yeah.
To
too.
really have a thorough discussion of this.
but we could put it, make it something to discuss at next town meeting,
Mhm.
and people could vote on it then. And then I guess we'd have to choose if we wanted to vote on floor or put it on the ballot. But yeah, I think we can talk about it when Jim's here, 'cause
Well, if we decide that we wanna make some changes, just so that we can get more discussion going and have a little more thought for the amounts, because I think what our discussion was is that the smaller entities, it's really peanuts they ask for. It's
Right.
really only three, you know, I can't remember, 3 or 4 that have quite large sums, that, you know, we could put them on notice at the town meeting, like we could discuss that this is what we want to do going
Right.
forward, because some of the amounts we feel are disproportionate and have just sort of
They've
become
got
part of it,
momentum and
and
it
because
just
then it would
keep
take
going.
effect for the next year,
Mhm.
right? Okay, so why don't we then table this discussion, and when Jim is back from gallivanting around, we can talk about this at the next meeting, because we haven't had much chance to talk about it with all the bylaw stuff. Okay, everyone okay with that?
Yep.
Okay, so let's move on to old business.
We'll talk about the other half of Reed Farm Lane. So we've submitted updated forms with the appraisal and the cost benefit analysis to the state, and we're gonna continue to push them to get all that information off to FEMA so that the grant agreement can get adjusted for the higher number. There's good news in that the state has said that they would at a minimum match, provide the match. So FEMA only pays for 80% or 75% of purchase price, so the state is saying that they would provide the match of the appraised number, and then, you know, potentially provide a portion of the business value too. So But the first step is to get FEMA to update the grant agreement,
Okay.
once the state's, done their part of it, and I don't have confirmation yet that the state has done that.
So you're saying the minimum payout at this point is 1.2,
Yes, if everything
and then
goes
there,
together.
there may be an additional business value.
Yep, which was 287, and it's, I don't, however much of that the state could cover out of the Flood Resilient Communities Fund.
Is there gonna be a capital gains tax on that?
I don't know, that's between them and their
Yeah.
tax professional.
Yeah, okay.
Anytime you sell anything, there's
Yep.
potentially consequences. On the broadband side, they're reaching the end of the build out, and people should be going or getting leafleted at some point about the service, and people can put in their zip code right now, or their address rather, and if they want to request to be contacted, they can go to Fidium's website, put in your address, and say contact me.
So are there places in town where there are competing
There will be.
companies?
There will be.
There will be everywhere, almost not everywhere. Where I live, there won't be. But in the villages,
How about Damie Mountain Road?
on parts of it, yeah, the parts that are covered with Comcast, so the
Comcast.
closer to the villages you are, probably the more of a chance you have of having competing services, which should be good.
Yeah.
So, out of
Mhm.
curiosity, I had contacted Jim Salzgiver because there was a bunch of stuff going through, these neighborhood chat things because, this young man has shown up at our door twice and it's always kind of, 6:30 in the evening and he doesn't have any ID or documents, but he's got his vest on, and he's talking about Fidium. And he's like, yeah, so here's my cell phone, call me if you want us to install. And so I said to Jim, I said, everybody's saying they're casing the joints, but he seems to know a fair amount about Fidium and I'm not quite sure what's happening. So Jim had reached out to see if in fact they did have people, and apparently they were doing marketing efforts, but nobody could really acknowledge whether the kid that stopped at our house and was stopping at other people's houses was with Fidium or not. Which I thought
That's
was
scary.
It was a bit
I
odd.
can-
Yeah.
I
It's
can
a bit
reach
odd.
out to their PR person.
I've found their crews to be a little,
Their
rough.
their contract service for the most part too.
yeah.
They're not actually consolidated
Right.
employees, they're.
But the guys
Fired
doing
up.
the work, they're just less professional.
Mhm.
In terms of basic safety stuff about, how they're marking out a road and like traffic control
Yeah, the traffic control was really loosey-goosey.
is, just not, especially compared to what they're doing in Main Street with the sewer in
Mhm.
Manchester. It just seems like they went with the lowest bidder and they're
Yeah.
cranking it out.
Yeah. It's also interesting because we have Comcast and our service has suddenly, I only get 2 bars where I am, now that's AT&T, but our internet's been slower and I'm kind of like,
Last week the internet's been
why is
terrible in
this?
town at my office. I don't.
Yeah, suddenly Fidium comes to town and says, hey, by the way, we'll give you this cheap rate and oop, your regular service is now worse. It's just, Bo and I both noticed it, I thought it was a bit odd.
I've noticed in the last 10 days, the service at my office has been remarkably worse.
Yeah,
Where's your office?
Right near the Shaw's roundabout.
In Manchester?
Mhm.
Okay,
yeah, it's strange. What about your service?
seems fine.
Peculiar. Okay.
Talked about Coolidge Lane, Route 30, we continue to, try, we haven't really gotten many complaints about 30 itself. We've gotten some speeding complaints about side streets and we're focused on those right now.
We haven't had the motorcycle guy back yet this year, have we?
No, not that I'm aware
I
of,
haven't heard about it.
not that I'm
Let's
aware
not,
of.
knock on wood,
Knock on
let's
wood.
let's not say anything. Speaking of that, I know we talked about this once before, but is there anything we should be looking at? I know we looked at Mad Tom Road as a safety issue because of accidents, but now with that, there have been a number of motorcycle accidents too, along with the horrible one with Treat Williams there, and then there had been one was it 5 years ago with the young O'Donnell girl, similar situation, making a left-hand turn and a
Yep.
motorcycle was coming north. And I'm just wondering if that is in fact a dangerous spot, because there's that, it's just a little rise there, so you can't see it, and then you've got the intersection where people are turning, and if someone's coming at speed.
You're talking about down here?
I'm talking about where Morse Hill hits
Yeah.
Route 30.
South Dorset.
Oh, okay, yeah.
Because there had been about, I wanna say 5 years ago, it was before COVID, so, and there was a young driver and she was going south and she
Yeah.
was turning left onto Morse Hill and a motorcycle was coming north. And it was the same kind of thing where I think she turned and he hit her. And that was just how many yards from where the fatal accident was. And I don't know, what we can do, or if the state, we should point that out to the state. They're probably not gonna do anything with the speed limit, but if there's something because I think when you're driving north, you don't realize that people really can't see you because you're coming over that little hump.
Yeah.
And that's where people have been used to going 50 on Route 30, and so still there is some speeding there, and they come up really fast. And you've got school buses and all sorts of stuff making that intersection.
I can add it to the
Yeah.
list of things to look at.
I received a complaint regarding speeding on Madtown Road here, right in front of the town office.
Mm-hmm.
Have you received that?
Was it Rob?
No, it wasn't Rob.
I don't know, I just know the last time that we responded to one, I think he did a directed patrol and did radar for like 4 hours and there was like 3 cars. So,
Total.
not that the speeding's not happening, I mean,
Yeah.
it could be
Yeah.
true, so
Yeah.
we'll just continue. So we didn't have any luck the last time we tried.
Yeah.
But we'll continue to have them sit here.
Okay, finance report?
I can see the year-over-year delinquent taxes. As far as fiscal '24, we're 9% through the 9% expended at 11% through the year. This is a couple weeks old because I put these numbers together around the 10th. It's still early in the expense side of the year. Tax bills were mailed on the 8th. Payments coming in at a good clip. And the due date's the 12th. A couple weeks after that, we'll pay the fire districts. You can see the various sinking fund balances. We have transferred the FY 24 allocations over to those sinking fund balances. You can see what they are versus what they were in FY 23. And I'm trying to think what else. We've closed on the bond, and we've also put in the paperwork for the short-term note for the town office. So as far as that financial planning is concerned, we're ready to go. We just need to get the actual project kind of going. And that's it.
I see the, listed as an asset, the 10 acres on the
Yes.
upper Hollow Road.
Yes.
Not the lower Hollow Road.
Oh, yeah.
And does the passing of the
Yes.
zoning bylaw?
I think it impacts that, yes.
Yeah, okay.
I think it makes it more possible to develop that 10 acres
Yep.
with obviously engineering review.
Yep. So we should just kind of wait until the 21 days.
Yeah, I think it's once that is in place, then we can try to prescribe is it buildable, and then I think the track was is it buildable, and then could you appraise it and what would it appraise for?
Just do a feasibility study of it, or just?
No, try to get septic permits.
Oh, okay.
So I started that, which, and it's possible to get a road in, and then we're supposed to do test bits up there and just fill out the radar, but, you can do that anytime.
Yeah, we didn't push it because of
Right.
the bylaw change potentially would have an impact on
The
it. So.
getting a driveway in will be a challenge, but it's feasible. And there's room down below for septic, so.
Yeah. The lower portion of it is much more gently sloped.
If you could get at it from
Yeah.
that side, that would be ideal.
But you can't.
Cause it's pretty steep.
But you can't, oh, it's, yeah, I mean, to get down, you have to switch back a few times.
Yeah, it's just a matter of can you meet the metrics for the, you know, the grade percentages
Yeah.
and all that. Which I think it probably is possible, but we won't know until it all gets worked out.
Okay. Just curious about that.
Mm-hmm.
Any other questions on finance?
I move we approve the finance report as presented.
I'll second.
All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Okay, and manager's report, Rob, is there anything we haven't talked about?
Not really. I mean, the fire district project's moving along. We keep bugging them about getting some seed and topsoil into the village. Hopefully that's gonna come soon. The vendor just has, you know, they're lacking staff, like a lot of vendors are. But they seem to be doing a pretty good job, and, you know, overall, it's going along, you know, about as well as it should, I think. I think, you know, maybe you could make the case that they might be a little bit behind schedule on some of the individual service line work, but they've done a lot of mainline extension and installation in the interim.
In all the places where it's all dug up and it's just kind of dirt and ruts, are we gonna be paving that, or are they?
It depends on the road. I mean,
Like on Church Street?
yes, it'll get paved. It'll get paved. As
But
part
are we doing that?
They will be doing it.
They'll be doing that, okay, and, but that work has already been finished, like where I see that done, the work's been finished, correct? It's just they're waiting to pave.
Correct.
Okay.
But they'll wait to do that in
Until do it
conjunction
all at
where
once,
there's
right.
enough of a critical
Right,
mass
right.
to do it all at
Okay.
once, to justify bringing
Yep,
equipment in.
yep, yep.
Same thing with Route 30.
Yeah, yep,
Okay.
yep. We're trying to kind of rendezvous with them for the stuff that we had planned on paving, which is Kent Hill, Meadow, Cheney, and part of Dorset Hollow. And it's actually looking like the far end of Dorset Hollow, you know, we may try to segment, it's looking like most of the village stuff, the paving might not happen this fall, because they're not gonna be far enough along. I mean, we don't wanna pave a street and then have it dug up. With the exception of the far end of Dorset Hollow, there's I wanna say that there's about a 500-foot section, that's in particularly really bad shape, but also is a little bit outside of the water zone, the water utility zone, so we may segment that and try to get that done this fall. With all the rain, there's a couple of sections that are just starting to really break up. Other than that, the water stuff is going along pretty good. And so I talked about a lot of this other stuff. FEMA, we had the what they call the exploratory call today. This is related to the July 10th storm, and so we'll start to put numbers together for, you know, actual damage to roads and stuff. I talked about
Does it matter that Bennington County is not one of the counties that?
That's for individual assistance.
Oh, okay.
So for public assistance, Bennington County does qualify. So for damage to town roads, we'll get paid back.
Okay.
Nice. So, and that's it for the
Okay,
manager's report.
alright. Payroll?
Right in here.
Great. We've earned it.
I kept everything else kind of off because one, I wasn't here last week, and two, the bylaw needed its own.
Yeah,
Yeah.
just needed to get through it.
Well, our last meeting was 9:48,
Yes.
so I think we deserve a slightly earlier call.
Camera good, or do you want it on, is it on?
Just a little bit more until we adjourn.
The excitement of us signing papers.
Yeah. Just two?
Just to, So any other new business or anything anyone wants to discuss, other than going home early?
I move we adjourn.
Okay, do we have a second?
I will second.
Okay, all in favor say aye.
Ah.
Hi,
Good luck tomorrow, Liz.
thank you, thanks guys.